In our discussion tonight, as we journey through the blessings of paradise, heaven, one very important discussion is the spouses in heaven, or what is commonly known as Hur al-Ain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a number of verses speaks about Hur al-Ain. Sometimes using the word Hur al-Ain. And in other verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions azwaj. Zawj in Arabic, linguistically, literally means pair. But when it's used to refer to another human being, it means a spouse. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does mention spouses in the Holy Quran. For instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِآيَاتِنَا وَكَانُوا مُسْلِمِينَ. Those who believe in our signs, and they are Muslim, meaning they submit, they accept. أُدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ أَنْتُمْ وَأَزْوَاجُكُمْ. Enter paradise, you and your spouses. Many scholars understand from this verse that those spouses will be their spouses in paradise. Allah is not just saying that the person who was your spouse in dunya, they'll also enter, but you're not going to see them. It seems that this attribute, this sifa of being a spouse, will carry on into the Akhirah. Therefore, we can conclude from this verse that the believer will be with his wife in the Akhirah. But then you also have the issue of Hur al-Ain mentioned in the Holy Quran. You also have the issue of, let's say, a woman who married several husbands in dunya. Let's say her husband passed away or she got divorced. She married another husband. What happens to them? We have hadiths that comment on that. Therefore, let's have this very important discussion. Now, some philosophers have argued that in heaven, there is no such thing as having mates, having partners, having spouses. This is a worldly dimension because human beings have carnal desires here in this dunya, and therefore they have spouses, they have the need to mate, but not in the Akhirah, not in paradise, because paradise is this spiritual experience, and therefore it's inappropriate for the believers to even have this dimension on the Day of Judgment. Some philosophers have claimed that. What have our scholars stated? The majority of our theologians and scholars have not accepted that. They have said that when you read the verses of the Quran and the hadiths, it's very clear that in the Akhirah, believers will have spouses. They will have mates. And this is, in fact, one of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment in paradise. So we cannot come and claim this is all symbolic. Because what do the philosophers say when you tell them about these verses and these hadiths? They say, look, the Quran just wants to encourage you. People in this dunya, right, their aql, their brain, their desire is basically focused on having mates and spouses. So Allah just wants to somehow encourage you to be good. So He promises you something in the Akhirah that here in this dunya you care about, that drives you and motivates you. But in Akhirah there's nothing of that sort. It's just a way to encourage you. No, that's what some philosophers have said. That's how they explain these verses. Because when you challenge them and tell them, but there are verses in the Holy Quran that specifically mention the mates in paradise. So how do you just negate that? They're like, yeah, it's all symbolic. It's all figure of speech. Our ulama, the mainstream Shia scholars, have not accepted that. They have said that if on the Day of Judgment, there's no Hur al-Ain, there's no spouses, there's no mating, then that amounts to kadhib. That amounts to the Holy Quran, God forbid, speaking a false statement. In other words, it's a lie. Allah promises you something. When you get there, none of that exists. Not even close. Now, sometimes the person may not understand the depth of a ni'mah, of a quality. You can mention something that's close to it. Sure. Like we mentioned before, the food, the drinks, right? Obviously, the drinks of paradise are nowhere near what we have in this dunya. But in the end, they are drinks that you drink. It's food that you eat. It's clothes that you have fancy clothes that you put on yourself. So these scholars have said that the Quran is very clear that this is a dimension of paradise. We cannot just negate it. Yes, we don't exactly know what dimension it is. We don't know the specifications of it. We definitely know it's different than this dunya. But the same concept is there, that there are mates, that there are spouses for each other, and that this is one of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. In fact, we have hadiths that the greatest blessing in paradise, physical blessing, aside from the spiritual one, the spiritual one is the rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that Allah is pleased with the mu'min. But when you look at the physical blessings, one hadith states that the greatest blessing is the blessing of spouses. This hadith from Jamil ibn Darraj, he is a truthful narrator. He narrates this from Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam. He states that the Imam alayhi salam states that the greatest joy in paradise is having spouses. ما تلذذ الناس في الدنيا والآخرة بلذة أكثر لهم من لذة النساء وهو قول الله عز وجل زين للناس حب الشهوات من النساء والبنين. The Imam alayhi salam even cites a verse in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically describes the main temptations and desires that humans have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts with which one? Before money, before children, before anything, before food. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ, meaning to have the need to have a spouse. Therefore, the Imam alayhi salam states, إِنَّ أَهْلَ الْجَنَّةِ مَا يَتَلَذَّذُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ أَشْهَى عِنْدَهُم مِنَ النِّكَاحِ لَا طَعَامٍ وَلَا شَرَابٍ. So the Imam alayhi salam is very clear in this hadith that this is the greatest blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. So for someone to dismiss all these verses in the Holy Quran and all these hadiths, scholars say that's not acceptable. That's like rejecting the Holy Quran, rejecting the hadiths of Ahl al-Bayt.
Like احنا بنقول في اسم ونصيب هون انه مثلا وبالقرآن مذكور انه الازواج في بالدنيا ازواج، فهل مكتوب للانسان انه يتجوز او ما يتجوز بهالدنيا؟
See, in the end, everything that happens in dunya is by the qadar and the decree of Allah. However, the fact that Allah has a will for us doesn't negate your role. You still have to make the effort. You can't just say, it's the qismah. Whenever isma happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it happen. No. The Holy Quran makes it very clear that yes, Allah is the one who runs the system, but you're an actor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you appropriately, try to get married. Didn't work out once, try twice, try 3 times, try 4 times. It's okay. Some of the best companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like Al-Miqdad, they tried to get married numerous times. They were rejected until finally it worked out, or the Prophet interceded. So the idea that marriage is qismah in the sense that I have no role in it, whatever God has decided, it's going to happen. Let me just live my life until it happens. That's wrong. Not according to this understanding. The qismah means that in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a plan for you. But you work so that plan is actualized. If you don't make the effort, you may miss something that Allah wanted for you. So you still have to make the effort, make the dua, do what it takes to get married. Don't just rely on the qismah issue and not do your part.
But the thing is that in our culture, that men are the ones who
yeah, they have to take the initiative, which is not something Islamic, by the way. There's nothing in Islam that says women cannot take the initiative. In fact, Khadija alayhi salam, she took the initiative according to a lot of historical reports. That's completely okay. Yes, a woman has to do something appropriate. If you live in a society, unfortunately today, we live in a society where if the woman signals her interest in marriage, before the men, the women of the community, they start slandering her. Aib, are you desperate? What's going on? No, this is haram. If any woman says this about any girl, this is ghiba. This is a form of gossip, backbiting, haram. Allah will punish her for that. If a woman expresses her interest in marriage, there's nothing haram about that. There's nothing inappropriate about that. So a woman can take the initiative by, let's say, approaching a person in the community, asking him if he knows good families that maybe possibly can introduce her to them. That's completely appropriate from an Islamic perspective. I know some families, they'll wait.
Yeah.
They'll wait until somebody shows up. And if a person doesn't show up for 10 years, they don't make any effort. That's wrong. Make an effort. You as the father, talk to some other families in a creative, appropriate way. Start the discussion, start the process. But some of these old school parents, the very traditional ones, no, they won't do that. And بيظلموا بنتهم. Unfortunately, they end up oppressing their daughters. That's not appropriate. That is absolutely not appropriate. Yeah, this is just something purely cultural, not Islamic.
Sayed, can you have kids in heaven?
We'll talk about that next time. Yes. There is one hadith that if a mu'min desires to have a child, Allah will create for him a child over there. Because you get whatever you desire. So it's not going to be like dunya, you go through pregnancy and all the stages. Allah will create a child for you.
Especially like someone who unfortunately...
Who didn't have children in dunya, yes. So we'll have a hadith about that. I will mention it.